Hi everyone, my name is Vera, and you're watching another episode of Madiff Talks, our space to bring tech leaders, product people, and innovators to discuss the hottest topics in tech. Today's guest, he's a natural entrepreneur and has been involved in the blockchain area for a while. And at the same time, he is deeply committed to leveraging technology's potential to craft innovative solutions for the future. So today we brought Vitor.
Hello,
Hi, Vitor, how are you doing?
I'm good, and you?
I'm also doing great. Thank you for asking. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. We really wanted to explore how Web3 startups can grow in a sustainable way because that's crucial when you're trying to ensure you thrive and you remain relevant over the time. But anyways, let's go back to that in a minute. Before we kick off, just tell us more about you. Tell us more about your background, so we can move forward.
Oh, thank you for the warm introduction, Vera. I've always been driven by the passion for tech and the potential to create new solutions. Over the few years that I'm working within the blockchain industry, I've had the privilege to lead Qubitz, where we are pushing the boundaries of both blockchain and AI technologies with the aim to drive business growth and foster technological innovations. My journey began in the crossroads of science and tech. My initial background actually is chemistry, has nothing to do with both software development and AI and blockchain. But gradually, as I moved forward in my career, I more and more ended up in the field of tech and eventually blockchain. And this is a bit the summary of my past. Apart from Qubits, I had other ventures as well, not only in the world of blockchain and AI. I had another venture in the Netherlands, which we are still tackling the maintenance and inspection industry, and obviously, and I think maybe you have came in contact with one of our projects, which is Ticket World, where we are transforming the way the ticketing industry works by providing them a decentralized solution. And it's been quite a ride, Vera.
Yeah, it has been a whole of a journey, right?
Yes, for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, this moment that we take to introduce our guests right at the beginning when we ask them to say more about their background, I think that's when people at home understand how much effort we put into choosing the right person for the right topic. And today we brought you because you have uh, extensive background as an entrepreneur, right? And I hope you will agree with me if I say that entrepreneurship has its peaks and its valleys, let's call it like this. So, new experiences bring new learnings and new mistakes. And even if you try your best not to repeat the same mistake, you'll probably end up doing a different one. So, I wanted to know from your side, what do you think it's one of the biggest mistakes you probably did when you were trying to create or when you're trying to help growing one of your past businesses?
Big question. So the expression.
Please keep it as just one question, amiga. I mean, I imagine you probably have a lot of mistakes that you could share with us for people at home to learn, but just choose the biggest one so we can direct it.
Okay. So first, I think the expression you used, it's quite right. It's very steep peaks and very very deep valleys. Just to add to your expression, and that's an entrepreneurial journey. It's always like this. So biggest mistakes. Um, I think one of the biggest mistakes entrepreneurs do, and I did it myself, is not um, so underestimating the importance of market validation for a product or a service or a solution. I think it's very easy to fall into that pit hole because you have an idea, you think it's great because you had it. Suddenly you can kind of allocate resources to make that idea come true. And obviously in the beginning there's a lot of development and inception, but we should never forget to understand if the market actually needs that solution. I think it might feel kind of stupid what I'm saying, but this happens every time. It happens a lot, a lot. And we, especially with Qubits, since we both work the both blockchain and AI fields, we interact a lot with other startups because they need our expertise to help them understand how they can incorporate these solutions into their services. And so we see this firsthand, apart from happening to ourselves. Understand, Vera? So I think this enthusiasm with new ideas and jumping headfirst to the development without thinking, okay, does the market actually need this? Is one of the things I see the most, and it can have devastating consequences, and that's very concerning. Um, Another one I can add could be regarding the people you choose to work with you.
Ooh.
That's very, very, very important. Um, a startup is very sensitive, very, 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 very sensitive. A lot can go wrong very fast, and this is something we try to convey to people that start working with us. It's actually a high stakes gamble sometimes for the people that choose to work at a startup. Uh, but on the side of the startup, you also need to be very mindful on the type of person you bring to your team, because one person with the wrong vision within your team can completely destroy your team completely. We're talking about really small teams, five, six, up to, I will say, 10 people. One person is enough to completely destabilize the the ground of your startup, and that's also very, very, very important, and that's a mistake we did. As always, this happens every time. It's very hard not to do it, it happens every time. But that's the advantage of a startup. You can act really quickly, and you can minimize much quicker than in a big company the impact of a wrong decision such as this one. So yeah, I think importance, the cohesive, a cohesive team culture is really important. um and I think these are the two biggest mistakes. Maybe they're a bit boring, but they are for me one of the two big things. I think I fell into the how do you say this, to the
Within the process, you mean,
yeah,
probably within this.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah, I would
exactly.
agree with you like 100%. I think the rest of the team would probably agree if I say that Madiff also feels that a lot when it comes to building teams from scratch and how important it is to think about the team as a whole and how
Mhm.
one small piece can totally make the difference when it's not correctly put. And I also agree with your first idea, and I would probably um, frame this a little bit differently and look a little bit
Mhm.
more into challenges. I will agree
Mhm.
with you with the idea that beginning in the beginning, these companies often struggle with building real value propositions and address real problems, like you were saying. So, do you think there are like unique challenges that these startups face, and by these startups I mean startups in Web3 and AI. Do you think
Mhm.
these challenges are unique in this area, or are they
No, not at all.
to the
No,
traditional?
no, no, no. So we work with startups, but our main customers are not startups. We are incorporated. Qubit specifically is incorporated in UPTech in Porto, and we are very much in contact with the startup ecosystem, both in Porto and in other areas of the country. And because of the nature of what we do, is inevitable to be. But we have customers that are not startups, and just so to give you an idea of the reality, okay, on creating solutions, 69% of digital transformation initiatives fail. And this, you can fact check this later. Be my guest, and I'll tell you the sources. 95% of enterprise blockchain projects end in failure. And these are just two ideas that sometimes people can't wrap their minds around that, and this happens as well in the. outside the startup world, people make wrong decisions, and they pursue a path that is not viable. And obviously, you, we need to consider that in a startup, the impact is much higher. If I work at a very big company with very high budgets, mistakes are not as significant as in a startup. So I would say that. But Vera, maybe I walked away from the question. Can you remind me the question?
Yeah, yeah, probably. I would say you answered half of it, but we also
Okay.
wanted to know if there are like unique challenges
Oh, yeah.
that you think are specific to this
Yeah.
area.
So, uh, how can I frame this? So, for you, and let's focus a little bit on Web3 specifically. For you, Vera, what is Web3?
Oh, Vitor, why are you placing me with this question right in the middle of my podcast? Well, I would say that is a system that helps you to decentralize your information in a way that it becomes more secure and distributed, I would say.
Yes. There's a point I want to get, Vera. So the thing is, Web 3.0, and people refer to it as Web 3, is just the next evolutionary phase of the internet. Okay, and that's what it is in its core. However, this concept it regards approaching internet to a more intelligent, connected, and user-centric. That's basically it. The idea of transitioning from centralized Web 2.0 to which is dominated by big corporations, which is centralized, to a decentralized model, will eventually give back the power to users. This is Web 3. However, and this is something people feel recently, this term has been kind of appropriated by the blockchain community, and specifically the crypto community, suggesting that blockchain and cryptocurrencies would make this decentralized vision a reality. And it can, and it most likely will, but it's crucial to understand that while blockchain is part of Web3, of this Web3 conversion from Web 2 to Web3, it's not synonymous with it. Um, and more importantly, we need to understand that for Web3 to exist, blockchain is not completely essential. As a matter of fact, for a long, long time, there's been other technologies that allow for the same level of decentralization, but this decentralization didn't happen because decentralized communities and companies they don't allow this transition to happen, and so this is really important to say. So, in terms of challenges, I think the biggest challenge is the technical complexity. It's a new area. We are talking about new technology, new programming languages, new infrastructures, and it's very hard to understand and to keep up with everything new that's going on. Okay, so you often deal with issues like which blockchains to choose. There's like a ton of blockchains around. Is it scalable? Is it not? Does it match my solution? Does it not? And does it ensure that my solution can interoperate with other solutions? And this is sometimes very difficult to give a straight question. Obviously, that's why we exist. That's why we do what we do. Um, User adoption is also something really important, specifically because the concept of decentralization is to give power back to the users. So understanding how your users, your niche, uh, acts, needs, and interacts with your solution is also very important and sometimes very hard to do. Okay. Um, and in general, the regulatory landscape is also a big challenge, Vera, because everything keeps changing. And it's sometimes very hard to give a straight question to our customers, is like, because at this point now things are changing for me to the best, Okay, European Union made an effort to create like a sandbox environment where we can develop things that might not be there might not be a legal way to describe them. Okay, but they allow us to develop them and test them in the real world, so we can discuss how we can fit this within the legal landscape, for example, of the European Union. But that doesn't mean this is happening everywhere, and so that's also something hard to navigate around.
Mhm. Okay, so I would probably take pieces here and there because you spoke about user adoption, you spoke about regulatory matters,
Landscape.
and within this evolving environment, how can you help them, or how can a startup in this area create? Because the topic is to create
Hmm.
sustainable value, right? So, how do you create sustainable value within this never ending chain of evolution, for example?
So, Vera, regarding that aspect, I think we should focus on specifically. Let's to have this conversation focused. We need to think about startups that are actually trying to incorporate in the world of Web3. Okay. And the first thing, and this is an example I always talk about, is the challenges we faced with Ticket World. Ticket World is a decentralized ticketing and event management platform. And whether you understand what blockchain is or isn't, you buy tickets and you want to buy tickets. And the question that we had was, is the community willing to learn how to interact, to learn what is MetaMask, what is all these tools to interact with blockchain ecosystems, to buy a ticket? And the answer is they won't do it because of that. And so our approach was creating a platform that brings all the decentralization, all the advantages of a decentralized system, but allowing the user to choose if they want to remain with that ownership or not. And this was a little bit how we tackled that situation there. Uh, Regarding how we or how I think startups should look at this context, um, there are four main verticals that I think they should think about when considering incorporating decentralized solutions into their products or pursuing the role to create one purely for that focus. First is it must be community centric, and the growth must be measured accordingly. And that's really important. Web3 emphasizes decentralization, and a significant part of that is community. Sustainable growth in Web3 means growing in a way that empowers and values your community. Uh, so it's not just about the numbers, but to understand how active and how engaged this community is with your solution. Secondly, is are we implementing decentralized governance or not? And this is a choice; it's not mandatory, but obviously it's a choice. As Web3 startups can grow, they should, in my perspective, aim to distribute decision-making power. That's one of the features that blockchain allows in a very transparent and easy way. And so ensuring that on your solution, no single entity can undue influence is very important, and it brings a lot to your community. The ability to help you and help the product they use, or the product or the solution or the service they like, influence the decisions on how it will grow. Secondly, and this is only if you decide to pursue the road of actually creating a token associated with your project. Again, it's optional. The value of your product should not be at all tied to a token existing or not. Okay. Uh, Linking back to Ticket Roll has no token, and it will not have a token as long as the community that uses it does not tell us that they want to interact with the ecosystem in that specific way. Uh, and regarding if you want to pursue this road, is you need to carefully think on what is the architecture, what are the tokenomics of that. It's extremely important. And you saw, I think anyone saw especially the, I don't know if it's on with the Portuguese news, but I don't think so. They always talk about the bad things, and unfortunately within the crypto space, there's a lot of bad things happening all the time. But it's a very big ecosystem, so it's understandable. But for these Web3 startups to incorporate these cryptocurrencies, they need to create a system that fuels a sustainable growth. Otherwise, it won't remain stable and it won't be fair for the users. And again, coming back to the first most important thing, which is a community centric approach. If you are being unfair to your users, you're going to lose your users, and that's not very intelligent to my perspective. And fourth is the technological stability of what you are trying to do. If you are using a technology that is not stable, that it's not scalable for your specific purpose, you're gonna face a big challenge, which is completely over. If you are successful, eventually you're gonna need to completely overwork the technology stack behind your product, and that's hard when things are already rolling. One of the now taking us back to one thing that we do at Qubitz, which is like migrating legacy systems to newer ones. The biggest challenge sometimes is just I cannot go there and turn the key off the legacy system and turn the key on the new system. It doesn't work like that. And so these are the four main verticals that I think Web3 startups should focus on to create a sustainable and a healthy solution within the Web3 ecosystem. And this is kind of focusing a bit on the startups that want to go this path. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are a startup and you create a decentralized solution and you want to go this path, the Web3 path, let's say.
Okay, good. So, still following this same line of thought, and keeping in mind that all of these verticals that you just mentioned, is there any way that we can unpack this into smaller KPIs that the startups can keep track so they can control how it is evolving in general?
Of course. So I think again, I need to remind us that we are focusing on startups that shows the path of Web3, the path of uh, that specific path, because you can and we do, and a lot of the focus we do at Qubit is actually implementing the technology into contexts like supply chain and banking, which has nothing to do with crypto. Okay, and crypto ecosystem itself. It's completely separated. So we are focusing on that specific. We are not focusing on them, but focusing on the more Web3 context. So the first one, I think it's regarding the community. So you need to measure, you need to understand what is the effective way to measure your community engagement. And this sometimes can be challenging because it's not something there's not a book you can you can see a formula on how to measure engagement. um, but it's really really important to things like community members participation on governance proposals, community-led initiatives, etc. So it's you need to understand how to measure all these different things to come up with a way to understand that specific aspect. Then you need to try and this is it's a bit more challenging. It's something we call decentralization index. It's a measurement on how much decentralized
Mhm.
a solution actually is, because one thing is what you say on a website, and another thing is what your technology says when you analyze it. And so regardless if you want to share this with your community or not, which I strongly disagree. I think transparency is one of the cornerstones of Web3, and unfortunately that's not what you see in a lot of projects. But let's put that aside. Measuring how decentralized your solution is and creating a roadmap attached to that so you can move in the path of more decentralized. Sometimes in the beginning you cannot be fully decentralized for technical reasons, for budget reasons, for legal reasons, but there should be a clear pathway to more decentralization in your project. If you decide to implement tokens within your project. You should also try to measure transaction volume and the value of this context. Um, Monitoring this in time is also interesting to understand and to share, and I think that's also really relevant. Um, Still attached to community, I think understanding how your platform is growing, it's also a KPI that's really important in my perspective. So measure this growth, measure the retention of your users, uh, and try to understand what's going on. Why am I getting more users? Why I'm getting less users? Why are these users staying? Why are they not? And trying to convey this to your community and let your community give you the answers, because they will give you the answers. And this is sometimes people they don't understand, but people who use your solutions, they will tell you what's wrong. You just need to ask, and sometimes that doesn't happen. So I think these are a few. I can keep going. There's KPIs is a thing. So there's a lot of ways to measure all these aspects I mentioned before: smart contract interactions, token distribution, network security, and so on and so forth. You know, there's a lot of ways to do it, but compare to if we compare this to traditional startups, um, which usually they might focus on stuff like acquisition costs, lifetime value of customer, churn rates, net promoter scores. Um, these are still relevant for Web3 startups, obviously. Uh, but since there's a big emphasis on community and decentralization and network health, adding the ones I mentioned before, it's very important.
I also wanted to take the chance to ask you for your take on something very specific because you already mentioned regulatory uncertainties being a very important challenge for
Mhm.
Web3 founders. So I wanted to know how this lack of clarity around regulations in this arena affects how you can build a strategy and what
Yeah.
steps can they take to navigate these challenges, but of course in a responsible manner.
Yeah. So I'm going. This is a very important subject. So I'm going to look. I just now figured that I'm looking at the screen, not at the camera. So regulation, specifically in the Web3 space, is a very double-edged sword. Okay, because on one hand, it's necessary to protect your consumers, to ensure fair practice, but on the other, you need innovation, and if not approached thoughtfully, it can lead to a disaster. So first, you need to understand that you need to adapt to this fluid landscape. This is not something set in stone, and legally at all set in stone. So you need to understand. Okay, if I'm going to tackle this world, I need to understand that I'm going to have to adapt as we move forward. Okay. So one of the primary challenges in terms of Web3 startups in the regulatory landscape, it's different jurisdictions. As you expand, you're going to interact with different jurisdictions, and all these jurisdictions are going to have different frameworks legally, and what you do might have different personalities legally, and this is interesting and important to take in consideration. Okay, um, and at the same time, besides being different, they can change very fast. So when you're focused on one market, it's okay because okay, I know how this works, I'm ready to tackle changes on this market. But as you expand and you move to 3 4 5 different markets, this begins to be a very dangerous context. So not dangerous, I wouldn't say dangerous context, but you need to prepare for this. Okay, and this uncertainty can make it very challenging for startups, for their specifically to lay down their long-term strategies. um, the second is the funding part, because Web3 startups, they work a little bit different on the funding component. Uh, Regulatory concerns, they can influence a lot the sentiment of the investor, and these uncertainties can lead to having less opportunities, and investors, they might not be very comfortable because of legal complications. Okay. At the same time, the ecosystems surround the entire ecosystem of Web3, and specifically all these different blockchains, they invested in creating ways to help developers and help startups actually develop their products. So while there's an impact here, on the other side we have this different approach coming from the ecosystem itself to help you develop your solution, but there's a limit. Depending on how big your solution is, it won't be enough. So that's also really important. Then there's the operational challenges, because depending on the jurisdiction where you are operating or you think of operating, um, you can face restrictions of any type. And when we touch the money part, that's where things get more tricky. So but there are other challenges besides this, regarding data storage, for example, regarding handling requirements. So it's one of the. I know I'm giving, maybe I'm giving a perspective. This is all problems, but it's not all problems. But let's focus on on the problems.
Yeah.
The last thing I think is regarding your reputation and the trust. Uh, I myself, Qubitz, Ticket World, DocOS, Volumetric, they are some of the ventures I've created in the last few years. More will come, hopefully, and I need to conserve. I need to make sure that I can keep contributing to projects in a healthy way, and the success or the reputation of my previous projects are important, and people should not forget that. And in the industry, uh, striving for mainstream adoption, which it is what it is, uh, negative regulatory actions or news or whatever, um, they can impact the perception of Web3 itself and your startup and yourself. And it makes it sometimes harder to gain trust, because if you're operating on a market and your competitors show up on the news and they did something horrible, you're gonna get some. You're gonna get some. There's some hate coming your way. That's for sure.
Okay.
And I think just stay informed. Find ways to be flexible in your strategy. Engage with regulators. That's something specifically in Qubitz. I'm the one focusing on that. So engage with the European Union. Engage with the regulators that are acting to create these new legal frameworks. Prioritize transparency, because there's if you're doing things honestly, there's nothing bad in being transparent. um okay, now we have to stop. That's my so but this is the end. This is the end of my perspective. Sorry, guys.
Well, in that case, now that I have you like looking directly to the camera, I think that's probably the moment where I would ask you to just emphasize one of the many challenges that you highlighted throughout our conversation. I think this is really the moment to say, okay, if you had to choose a pitfall, a mistake that these founders really have to make sure that they avoid in order to pursue sustainable growth,
Yeah.
this should be it.
That's
You have to give everyone the chance to commit their own mistakes, but if you could save them from committing at least one, then you
yeah.
could like now and looking at the camera so they can understand it's important. That would be
Will.
great.
Yeah. So that's the easy question. Actually, that's the easiest question up until now. So Web3, and with all its revolutionary potential, it comes with a lot of pitfalls. I think the first one, and I think people will relate with this, is overhyping and under delivering, which is a great combination.
Mhm.
The Web3 space, is bursting with projects everywhere, and they promise the moon, and then they fail to deliver, and that leaves a lot of bad taste in the mouth. And so it is essential to manage these expectations. So don't forget that. Um, Neglecting user experience, that's something I see very often. So a lot of Web3 projects, they initially they launch the website, social media, Discord, they create all these interactions, but then they launch their platform and it's horrible. It's not nice to use. It's, who wants that? Why? So don't do that. Do something simple. No need to do everything to start with. Just do something simple first and let your users guide you into the direction that they want your platform to go and that they will appreciate. I usually say that users are the best, like testers for anything. Just give them to users and let them tell you what they want. So the second one is the over reliance, and this is specifically targeting the component of incentives and investment. Uh, while token incentives, they can be a powerful tool for growth, for community engagement, etc. Over relying on them can lead to these speculative bubbles and these unsustainable ecosystems that you see bursting everywhere. So, like I said a bit in another question, another thing we were talking about, token is optional. You don't need it. And if your solution depends on the existence of that token, something is not right. With a few exceptions, obviously. There's always exceptions, but in general, your solution must solve a problem. If it's not a token problem and the token exists and it's completely over reliant on that token, doesn't make sense. A big one, big one, big one, big one. Not prioritizing security. So the decentralized nature of Web3 makes it a very prime target for malicious actors. And if you neglect security, there can be a lot of catastrophic consequences, both financially and in terms of reputation. So don't neglect on the security part. Um, Something I sometimes see as well is like kind of isolating their projects from the broader tech ecosystem. It's like I'm Web3 and there's the rest of the tech world. And no, why? It's don't do that. Don't do that. Don't isolate yourself. Uh, Go to tech events. If even if they're not Web3 events, go to tech events. There's a lot of opportunities that you are missing out. And it's essential to remember that regardless what you think, if your solution focuses on Web3, it's part of this broader tech ecosystem, you wanting it or not. Uh, so ignoring these integrations, partnerships outside the Web3 bubble, it can limit a lot your growth. So don't do that. Ignoring governance, if you have the opportunity, if your solution is community focused, if it's decentralized, do not ignore the ability to create decentralized governance. That's really good. It's one of the cornerstones of Web3. So establish a clear, a fair, transparent governance mechanism to help your community lead your solution the way they users want them to go. Um, and the lesson, but I think we talked a bit of that. It's sometimes the lack of regulatory preparedness. They just people just go and they don't think of the basics. Obviously, one of the basic first thing I say today, which is, does the market want what I'm doing? But the second one is is this legal to do? Is there a framework where I can act legally? So avoid this. Stay grounded. Engage with your community. Uh, Adopt the continuous learning perspective. I would say in your life, not only on a Web3 project, but in your life as well. So yeah, it's in essence, while the Web3 space offers immense opportunities, is also very fraught with challenge. And by being aware of these kind of pitfalls and actively working to avoid them, founders can set their startups to a path of sustainable growth, which is ideal,
Okay.
which is
Thank
the topic of today.
you. And
Yeah.
I felt like you really stressed um, the necessary percentage so people could understand how important some of these matters are.
Mhm.
And I'm really glad we had you here today. Let's wrap up our conversation. I just want to know if you came ready for a $1 million question. If you've seen the
Should
previous
it?
episodes.
Should it?
You came ready, or
Sure, sure. I'm okay. You can ask whatever you want. Don't worry.
so?
Almost. If I don't want to answer, I'll tell you. I won't answer. So,
That's not an option at this point of our conversation. We are almost.
okay.
So this episode's $1 million question is: if you could go back in time and give your younger self one advice, similar to the one you just gave before this question. So if you could give yourself one advice on founding and growing a startup in the Web3 universe, what advice would it be? And this time you can just give one.
Okay. So first off, I have to say that if I could go back in time and tell something to myself, most definitely will not be regarding founding companies and startups. I'm joking. But but if it could only be regarding that specific subject, I don't know. Maybe embrace patience. You know,
Okay.
uh, and yeah, like embrace patience. Be more patient. Patience is a virtue if
Mhm.
used properly, and maybe do not so not and this is something that happened early, and this is really easy for you to fall for this. It's like you feel that you can do everything. You feel that you can be the sponge for all, you're the sponge of all the problems, and when you squeeze me, all the solutions come out.
Mhm.
And that can be very detrimental for your health, for your psychological health as well.
Mhm.
So I think, yeah, be patient, and choose wisely what problems to actually tackle. And I think it's not very inspirational, but it is, I think, what I will tell myself.
But it's so curious. Like, do you think not being patient enough was an issue for you a while ago?
Definitely. I don't know if you noticed, maybe it's hard to notice, but I'm bald. Well, I'm bald. So this baldness, it's not for chance. Eventually I would be bald because genetically my family, the men in my family are all bald. But but it was very young, and it was because of that. I was very prompt. I wanted to do everything. I wanted to be everywhere. I wanted to be proficient. So I would measure initially I would measure the quality of the results based not only on the actual quality, but on the speed and the amount of things I could do. So it's about that. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Well,
what about you, Vera? I have to ask.
what advice?
If
Unfortunately,
you
I
could,
don't have the.
if you could go back, and you could give an advice on yourself, uh, what would you say
Yes,
to
I'm
yourself?
glad you shortened the question because unfortunately, I cannot tell my younger self because that younger self didn't have the chance to create any startup. So that's not for me.
But
My
we are all entrepreneurs. You just choose to be an entrepreneur solely for your wife, but your wife is also a startup, if you
Mhm.
think about it.
That's curious. Well, I would say probably ask the right questions because sometimes you're very excited about something new that you forget to really explore things deeply and understand
Mhm.
if that's really something you would want for yourself. But that's more like a life advice, not really like a business advice. I mean, you can use it in that perspective, but yeah, always make sure that you ask the right questions and everything that you need to do to take a proper decision. Fair enough.
Nice one. Fair enough.
Yeah. Well, Victor, thank you so much for joining us. I believe you already understood for us it's really important to fight a little bit of misinformation, and we really choose our guests in areas where we feel they are very comfortable in talking about. And this was a great episode. For people who are watching, we are going to leave this on our LinkedIn page and other social media for those who weren't able to watch it live. And we'll also be linking your social media so people can keep track of your work. And yeah, we are also and always preparing new episodes, and I hope you stay tuned for the next ones. And Victor, thank you again, and I hope you have a nice day.
Thank you very you too.